everyone, it's Cindy. Welcome back to Studioloo. So I'm here to do a wrap up of a really fun 2021 challenge that I partook in from Brooch textile artist, whom I've linked in the description box below. This was her 52 tags handmade challenge, where each week she would give us some kind of an interesting textile based prompt, and we would create a tag with that prompt. So I'm going to do a quick wrap up of my 52 tags, just talk about each one a little bit. Pardon me if I don't remember all the details of where my mindset was going when I was creating them, but I thought it would be nice to have this little wrap up and talk about them. So I will start with week number 1. And the prompt here was all white. So we used all white. So what I did with this tag was backed it in white fabric and then white lace above it. You'll see the holes here. Then I added some lines of another off-white sort of thread, embroidery floss, and I weaved through it with white boucle, and then I added this paper white, very delicate leaf on top, and then up here, this is a shell. I forget the name of it right now. It was sent to me from a friend from the Irish Sea, but it's a beautiful little horn-shaped shell. So that's all white. Week 2 was a heart. So this one was cute. I chose this fun, it's actually like a 70s dress fabric, and I stitched on this little faux leather heart, and then all these little V-shaped stitches are done with my hand spun yarn, and they're kind of like little hearts on top. Week 3 was so much fun. This is one of my favorite tags. So I did it on a background of inked up paper, and this is the Scrappy tag. So this is a bunch of little strips of Scrappy fabric, and you stitched down the center and you just kept layering them under each other again and again until you got an entire tag worth, and it has this nice kind of texture to it. It's one of my favorites. I think I will treasure this particular one. Week 4 is fly stitch. So that's this stitch here and the white, and I just chose to depict sort of a dandelion and stitch down some leaves that I felt were very kind of dandelionish, and it's all on this nice, this is actually a gray suede fabric. Week number 5 was kisses, like XOXO, so it's like cross stitch, but it's all these little X's, and then I just did some little French knots and some extra stitches and added this flower to just kind of bring some kind of a theme together for the tag, and I love the colors of this one. Week number 6 was a bevy of buttons, so I was so excited to do this one. So I first of all used paper, added some rusting medium to it, then added some of my batik hand-dyed fabric to the back, and then just began stitching on all these fun brown and blue, mostly vintage buttons. There's a wood one on top. I incorporated a little button card of vintage buttons, and I just really love the look of this one. Week number 7 was Hexis. So I cut out these hexagon shaped fabric bits and bobs, and then just did a few other things to just bring interest. I added some sparkling medium to the back and did some bullion stitches, some French knots, cross stitches, and just layered some other fabrics to kind of pull the whole thing together and make it interesting. Week 8 was French knots, bullions, and pistol stitches. So I used this really fun 70s dress fabric and just did some kind of florals, added a little bit of French knots, some bullions, and some pistol stitches. And this was before I fell in love with bullion stitch, which is a recent advancement in my sewing career. And so I didn't do a lot of them, but there they are. Week 9 was bits and pieces and a gift. I believe that what I chose to depict as the gift is this birch bark. It's like a gift from nature. And then I just used nice little bits and pieces. This is some lovely gold Japanese fabric that early in the pandemic, my husband had wanted some nice masks for work when we were still wearing the fabric ones, and so he chose this nice fabric, and I just did lots of stitching and added some of this. These are actually a gift too. They were some beautiful snowflakes that were like crocheted that I received from a woman who was selling off her estate. And then next we have Suffolk puffs, or yo-yos as they're often called. So I made a couple yo-yos and added them here, and then I added some other things to make them interesting. I always feel like yo-yos for me, or Suffolk puffs, they have this kind of like crafty clatch kind of look to them that just, it's not appealing to my aesthetic. Just not my thing. I have seen them used in beautiful ways, like in blankets. I actually purchased a vintage blanket that's entirely made of them, and I love it. But then there's a lot of ways that like I don't like how they look. It's kind of weird. We all have our own tastes, I guess. So I layered some fabrics, added lace. I added this little beautiful, I don't even know how this is made. It's the finest thread. It was sent to me from my girlfriend who lives in Qatar, and it's just this beautiful piece of like trim. So I just did more stitching and just embellishing, added some press-on stamping. This one was so much fun. This is week 11, and it is rings. So these are little metal rings. This one, those two that we wrapped. There's actually like a button, a kind of button that I can't recall the name of right now, that you can make in the same way. You basically wrap with like almost like a slip knot all the way around the ring, and then you can sew across it and make like your own little buttons. So this was kind of an ode to that. This is like little tulips, and then this one is just like pink and yellow. Then I added some other kinds of rings, these little shashi mirrors, some lace and whatnot, and just other little ring type things. This is a wooden 3D printed wooden cog. Next we had blanket stitch, and I was very new to blanket stitch when I created this, and I honestly wasn't too much of a fan, but part of it was probably because I took it to the next level, which was to add all of this beading, which is actually the only part of the blanket stitching on this tag that I actually like. I think these are blanket stitch, but some of them are a little bit like non-perfect, and this was definitely a learning tag for me. Overall, I think it's pretty. I embellished it. I used a nice fabric, but at the time I wasn't that happy with it. I am now. I think it's quite lovely now, but this is week 13, and this is layers with gold. So I backed everything in this very gold fabric, and then just kind of added other subtle golds, layering and layering up the piece until I was happy with it. Added some flowers, and there's some lace back there. So yeah, that was a fun one. And then week 14 was fun. It was pocket. I believe this was pocket and a memory or something. Yeah, pocket and a memory. So basically my memory was of my trip to Newfoundland, and I depicted like the ocean and the landscape, the craggy, interesting trees, the colorful little row houses, and some of the big rocky outcrops. And then I just added some lace to kind of add to that water type feel. These little bits reminded me of the birds, the kittiwakes that dive down there and they grab sea urchins, and then they fly up into the sky and they drop them to break them open to eat them. So then inside the pocket, I actually put this rock that has some lovely windswept markings on it from my trip to Newfoundland. It's just this lovely stone that I collected there. Week 15 was a tiny landscape, which funny enough I actually had done the previous week. But this one, I used this fun fabric that kind of reminded me of trees. It was from like a polyester dress from the 60s. And then I just stitched a few different types of trees, a little cabin, and just, you know, some foliage and little layers of maybe rock or shoal. And then I stitched this to look like a big moon in the sky. Then this one is week 16, and this was seed stitch. And this one is special to me because it was made from my son's little hoodie from his like 3-month-old baby hoodie that didn't fit him anymore. And I thought the space theme overall would be nice. So we basically just did seed stitch everywhere. I did some in gold and then left 3 circles. Week 17 was couching with a different color that we hadn't used yet. So I actually used some vintage neckties and other fabrics here, and the color I chose, of course, was purple. I hadn't used it very much. I added some yarn up here, and then I just did different styles of couching all the way down. Couching is just trapping fabric under stitches, basically. Number 18 is one of my favorite tags, and it's intentionally a little smaller because it's a lot of work. It's paper piecing. So these are all hexagonal paper pieced little sort of quilt bits, and then I stitched through each one like a vintage blanket, and then I did some gold slow stitching over top, and this is all on some beautiful blue batik fabric. Week 19 was words, and as I recall, yeah, this one was fun because I used this lovely, it's like vintage cross-stitch kind of fabric, and so I just chose some words that were kind of stitchy: thread, scissors, buttons, needle, and I like how the colors came together in this. It just feels like a fun tag. The blue and the red are they're really fun to me. Week 20 was Pekingese stitch. I kept this one very simple and just did stitch here and here. I can't say it was my favorite at the time. I think I felt it was a little bit difficult, but since then I no longer find that. I guess, with the more experience in stitching, you sort of adapt and feel more comfortable. So those are my Pekingese stitches at that time. This one I actually did not like at all. It was probably one of my least favorite because it was so hard. It was week number 21, Bullion Edging. So I know bullion has been the stitch that I think the majority of people who have complained about anything have complained about. I've heard Anne talk about, I know you don't like bullion stitching, but she's right. I mean, it's a very useful and interesting stitch. So it's particularly difficult when you use it on edging. So basically you're wrapping and you're making this, circular kind of wrap around your thread to create this edging. I chose a thistle theme, and this is actually a fabric that I recycled from an old couch that I had. So I really love the fabric though. And so yeah, this was not my favorite. However, since then I have gotten much better at bullion stitch, and I now actually quite enjoy it. I haven't tried doing it in edging again. I'm not sure I've recovered completely, and we'll try that again soon. Week number 22 was layers of lace. Pretty self-explanatory. I really liked this one. I thought it turned into a beautiful tag. I like the colors. Then week number 23, just have to tip my tin a little here. I've got these all stored in a tin, was a bunch of flowers. So I chose to depict lilacs because at the time they were in full bloom and they were really inspiring me. So I used the backing was my eco-printed fabric, and I like how this bit of resting here looks sort of like a moon. Okay. And then the lilacs are all here. I did the heart-shaped satin stitched leaves, and I just used French knots for the lilacs themselves. Week 24 was tatting. I had never done tatting before, and it was such an experience. I have even more respect than I did then for tatting. I think my tatting, I'm quite impressed with some of it. Some of it, it's not perfect, obviously, but I quite like it. And I like how the circles in the fabric, I sort of was able to use that as a way to fill in, give myself limitations. So overall, happy to have learned how to do it. Not sure I would do a lot of it. It's quite difficult. Week 25 was weaving, which I'm very familiar with. Had a lot of fun doing this. This is all mostly my hand spun yarn, except for down here, which is my hand dyed merino sock yarn. And I just really enjoyed making this tag using different textures. Week 26 was so much fun. It was create a medal. So I was really happy with my results at this time in the botanical eco dyeing I've been doing. And I really love how these birch catkins looked. So that's kind of like an achievement that I felt like I made this year. I really learned how to print well with different kinds of plants. So then I just added a couple of lace bits to just sort of hang down, just some favorite laces I had in my stash. And I really loved like the idea. A lot of people were using something metal to put on their medal. So I chose this, which is like an old kind of part of a cabinet pull, and it's rusty and old and beautiful. And I just really like how the whole thing came together. Okay, sorry to get this one untangled here. There we go. This is week number 27, and it was beaded tassels. So we were to create like a bit of a lip in our fabric and you know, create these beaded long tassels. They were kind of tedious to create, I won't lie, but overall I think it's kind of fun. I don't see myself using a lot of beading tassels in much of my work, but it was fun to do, and I can say that I've done it now. Okay, come here. Week 28 was spider wheel stitch, and I loved every bit of this. I found different ways to do it, and it was just really fun to do these rounded stitches. And I just stitched some of the leaves in the background for interest. This one was another one of my favorites. I learned the term from Anne Ort, which is this kind of like your jar of random threads from all your sewing projects that you throw into a jar. And she calls that an ort, which I love. And so basically you make a tag and then you lay them all down on top, and you can use dissolvable mesh or whatever. I forget what it's called right now, but it's basically what you would lay down on top, stitch over, and then you can put it in water and it will completely dissolve. So that's what I did with this, and it was a lot of fun. Week 30, also another favorite. It was to create a brooch and to take a picture of yourself wearing it. So it's got a little safety pin on the back there. I used some sequined organza, some beautiful lace that I loved, and I painted the leaves, and then I used this recycled jewelry that I thrifted and just thought it would be really beautiful on there, which it was. Next was, the theme was gold. So as you can tell, I used lots of different gold, some trim, a feather, some rings, and a vintage little buckle from an old belt, and an eyelid, a shashi mirror, vintage button. This was actually from a Christmas decoration, some organza in the background, and it's all on top of a mordanted printed fabric. So this dark area is actually a leaf. I'm not sure if you can see those details there, but when you mordant fabric with the recipe that I use, it turns the fabric a gold color. So it's a lot of it was really appropriate for this particular challenge. Next was week 32, Lazy Daisy Stitch. So I used a vintage tea towel, which probably kind of takes over the look of this tag overall, but these are my Lazy Daisy stitches. All these little flowers around the edge of the bird. This one was another favorite of mine. This is week 33, and the theme was flags. And for whatever reason, it felt very like a boat type, I don't know, like a boat type theme to me. So I used this, it's like blue vintage cross stitch fabric, and then I took some hemp cordage and just made this little like round tied bit for the top. And then we were to essentially, you have 2 knots at the back, And this is the cordage or whatever you're going to use. So your flags can actually move. So you have 3 fabrics that you layer them up and you embellish them however you like, and you cut them into the shape that you would want your flags to be. So I don't know why, but this took on a real kind of boating, oceany kind of nautical theme to me. So I beaded and cross-stitched on this one. I love this fish. Added an eyelet and some pink lace to kind of match the colors in this fish. And this is just a little fun one where I did some rolling up of the fabric and some vintage buttons. And so yeah, I quite like these. I think it's a very cute idea. It also gets me very curious about Anne's challenge for 2022, which is going to be 52 flags handmade, and she's running it on her Patreon. Week 34 was cup of tea. So I stitched this little cup, this little mushroom fabric for the cup, some more of the gold organza in the background. This is just a nice green fabric, and I stitched Time for a Cuppa. Week 35 was buttons and something precious. So the something precious is the background fabric, which is beautiful. It's like a watercolor fabric, and it was from an Alice in Wonderland dress that I had made for my daughter that she grew out of. Here are the 3 vintage buttons that I used, all very beautiful, and then added some just kind of simple accents, some colors that look good. So some pink and some teal and some ribbon. Week 36 was slow stitch. So I used some fabrics that I loved, roses and sort of this red folk arty fabric on top of eco-printed fabric. And then all these little pink stitches are just little running slow stitches. Week 37 was weaving fabric. So that's exactly what I did. These are all just different fabrics, scraps that I actually bought from the Mennonite store, where you can get all these little scraps from the quilts that they make. And so those are the fabrics that I used for this one. And I really like how it turned out. I just did little cross stitches around the edge. The next 2 weeks kind of go together. So week 38 was reverse applique, where you cut out shapes and you layered fabric on top and then stitched around to kind of have them like these little hidden bits that were under the main fabric. So I chose to depict trees and the moon and some stars. And then the following week was to use those little bits that you had cut out in an applique, which I did here. So in this one I used here's the bits from the trees. So because there are multiple layers of fabric, there's actually 4 layers of fabric here, then you're able to choose in the hole sort of where you cut out which fabric you want to show. That's the whole concept of reverse applique. Then we took all those bits, so there were like 4 layers from each one, and then I just stitched them on as like leaves around this central flower. Next, we had week 40, yummy. Use something from your stash that is yummy. So I used a few yummy things here. So first, in the background, this is wool and silk that I have wet felted into cloth that I do felting with. And this was just a very beautiful blend. So I used it in the background. I put some iridescent silk organza on top. And then up here is, this was from a fire opal necklace that was broken, and this was kind of the main part of the necklace, so it's extremely beautiful. Yeah, precious. Week 41 was bullion stitch. I had actually enjoyed it a lot more doing it with yarn, a thicker, something thicker that I could really get some more coverage with. So I did like lilacs again, and then did these. This is all with yarn. This is sort of an Irish yarn, actually, an Aran Irish yarn that's very beautiful. And then I just did this little sort of bit up top with some hand-dyed boucle. And this is all on like a really beautiful gold fabric. Then next we had a tag on a tag. So This one, I just created this little pocket. This is actually made from, it was a placemat that was released at the Dollar Tree for fall, and it looked like a big leaf, but I just really loved the coppery look to it. So I just kind of did something that I felt was interesting in the background. I used a vintage doily that I had gotten from an estate sale that week. I had depicted another tag here. So we have a tag, and then a little pocket that has this little tag with some gold organza, some little stitching. And then it just plunks right in there. Week 43 was using fringe, and this one was kind of a little tricky but very fun, and I love how the colors came out and how the tag looks. Week 44 was a lot of fun. It was a little more time consuming. I did this rose on this fabric that I really love. I thought it was a nice kind of loose frame, and it's cross stitch. So I just did some cross stitch, and it's on like a denim. It's really nice. I love how roses and denim look together. Then we have week 45. The theme was fireworks. So I used a lot of sequins that I stitched on and created these little shapes of bursting fireworks. And this is on some woven fabric, again, recycled from my old couch. Week 46 was a lot of fun. It was wrapped objects. So I chose these little sticks that I've forged, and I collect all sorts of little things from nature. And this is on some nice vintage 70s kind of fabric. And I just wrapped different colors, tied some fun knots, and yeah, that was a fun one. Week 47 was a bird. So this is actually the same kind of technique with which I created my my Scrappy tag from my Ort. All these threads were kind of scrappy, and I just laid them down and stitched them all together, and then added some vintage cross-stitch blue fabric and a little beak, did a French knot for an eye, and just kind of did some little feet. I love the fabric in the background on this one. Week 48, I kept very simple, and it was really guided by the fabric choice, I think. It's sheaf stitch, so it's just like these little sheafs. And I know this stitch has other names, and it's kind of like related to corn or something, because it kind of looks like a corn husk or a corn doll. But yeah, just very simple and fun. Week 49 was about memories, and this one I think is quite special. I really enjoyed making it, and it's got me inspired to do something in a series that will be coming up. So this was about a lot of the women in my life who have inspired me. I won't name them here because I don't have their permission, and some of them are no longer with us, but essentially early in my life, I worked in a tea room, and the owner of that tea room really taught me a lot about life, and also about being employed, and about children. Yeah. And then these are book pages that I kind of accordioned and stitched down, sort of like another mother that I've had in my life, and I've been lucky to have many kinds of motherly figures. She's a bookseller and a really wonderful woman. This yarn is representative to another motherly figure that I have in my life who taught me how to spin yarn and was very integral in my early journey toward becoming an art yarn spinner and a spinner in general. And then we have this little bit of landscape back here that is just kind of meaningful to me about my childhood, how I grew up, and people who were influential to my love and respect for nature. Then these buttons, they definitely, like a lot of us, they take me to my grandmother's button tin. And this little flower here is reminiscent of one of my best friends who she's a lot of really funny things that it's not funny, but like really interesting. And I think this reminds me of some of her tattoos and her love for music, and I just kind of really associate this image with her. The indigo in the background here is dyed by me, and it's reminiscent of a couple of my online friends who are beautiful indigo dyers who lived a couple different places in the world, and were part of a very rich community of spinners on Ravelry that I was part of for many years. This bit of denim is for my mom because my mom she just wears a lot of denim jeans. She's just a jeans girl, and it just kind of reminds me of her. I was trying to think of textile things that reminded me of certain people. And then these florals remind me a lot of, again, my grandmother and her, like, how she kind of dressed like the queen a little bit, like a lot of florals. And there's other things in here too. There's definitely some other women and other memories. Some of them, I think certain things can, it can be reminiscent of more than one woman in my life. This little twig here, definitely. There've been a lot of women who've inspired me about nature, and so they are all in here. Tag number 50 is circles. So I just literally used a bunch of fabrics that I liked, some more of that fun, what was it called? The Dollar Tree, like, placemat. That's the word I'm struggling for, placemat. And just some little, like, circles from eyelets. So that one was fun. Week 51 was to stitch a wreath, and I really liked this one. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of right around the holidays, so it's fun to do. And then our final tag, 52. This was a macrame tree. I've never done macrame before. So I did so with, again, some of this beautiful yarn that I got from my friend in Dublin. It's an Irish Aran yarn in beautiful Irish green. It takes me to Ireland every time I have it. I have very little amount left that I'll be using probably in my my journal of stitchery that's coming up. And I just layered it on some blue fabric with some of my tea-dyed lace, and I just did this really fun little tree. So that is my wrap up for 52 tags handmade. I can't believe I committed to the entire year of this. I am so excited that I did. Thank you for watching, and thank you so much to Anne Brooke for this super fun, incredible challenge that taught, I think, all of us a little something, and some of us a lot of something. I really loved every bit of this, and I'm so happy to have this collection. I keep them in this little tin here, just in the order of the weeks that I did them, and my list of what the prompts are. And I just tuck it away here. And so yeah, 52 tags handmade is a wrap for 2021. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. If you enjoyed seeing this wrap up and you'd like to see more of my textile work, please subscribe to the channel. You can find information on Anne Brooke Textile Artist down below in the description box, along with my social media. It's been a little bit of talking here, guys. So thank you again for joining me, and bye for now.